Hi all, my name's Camilla. I am part of the Rural Recovery Support Service. I am here with Kim Deans, Henry Goodall from the DPI and Rob Edwards from that team. Kim is an educator and a coach that works with farmers to support them through this process, but also to do innovative bits and pieces. So we're here to listen to Kim over the next 3 webinars. So one today, one tomorrow, and one on, good morning, Melissa, one on Wednesday next week, on the 8th of June, to see how we can help you regroup. So on that, I would like to firstly acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. For me, I am in Wiradjuri country, and I would like to pay my respects to the people and the lands, to elders past, present and emerging, and to their continuing culture, strength and resilience. I would like to just double check that you can all hear and see us okay. So if you can do the reactions down the bottom, we can do hand clapping or a big thumbs up, or if you've got your camera on, just give us a nod or a wave. Thank you, Alicia, that's great. So for today's session, what we would like is for you to use the chat for your questions, if that's okay. Please feel free to type it in at any point. If you don't feel comfortable asking certain questions now, we will put you in contact with Kim and you guys can talk about certain things down the track. We know that there are some sensitive topics in this area, and we just want to be supportive. So Kim Deans, the star of the show. Kim is a coach and an educator and works with land managers all around the country, and is trying to create resilient and regenerative but profitable farming systems, and has had lots of experience in natural disasters. So Kim, I'm going to hand it over to you, if that's okay.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the DPI for the opportunity to present this series. It's really, really exciting to be able to work with you on this space. I'd also really like to acknowledge those of you who have joined us live, or if you're watching the recording, for actually prioritising this time to work on the business aspect of natural disaster recovery. It would be really great. I haven't got time to say hello to you all individually, but it'd be great if you could use the chat box and if you could share your location, what enterprises you run and what disasters that you've been impacted by, just so we know, a bit more about those of you who are in the room today. That would be great, and I will get and check that shortly. I'd also just like to acknowledge and share my condolences for the losses that many of us have endured due to natural disasters over the last few years. These losses can be personal, business related, and also affect our communities and our landscape. So I really acknowledge that. We often get caught off guard by natural disasters, and we end up dealing with the process of grief around the loss of things that have taken many years, if not generations, to build. So that's a very real space we're talking about today, and it's actually in the room with us. So I really want to acknowledge that. Many of us are still raw from these disasters, and I know some of you might be joining from flood affected areas where you're still on edge. This thing's not over yet. We've still got saturated catchments. So, I acknowledge you if you're living with that ongoing uncertainty, and the potential of more extreme weather events is very real for all of us. So just acknowledging that we're talking about an emotionally charged issue in a realm where we're very current and we're very immersed in this space. So yeah, I also have been through natural disaster in 2019, February the 13th, 2019, you never forget the date. We were impacted by the Tingha Plateau fire, which it feels like a drop in the bucket looking back, looking at what's happened since then. But at the time, it was sort of probably what the early days of this latest round of natural disasters, I would feel. I remember in that space, even 6 months in, still feeling quite overwhelmed by it all. In that initial phase, not even recognizing our property, like looking outside and going, yeah, this is our house, but this isn't really our place, is it? It just looks so foreign. And not really wanting to go outside. You're kind of on a bit of a pendulum between gratitude for what you have left, but also devastation for what's lost. And that can be really interesting to navigate. And, you know, also the overwhelming job list is just amazing. We tend to also run on adrenaline a lot, particularly in those early days following disaster. And the length of time that impacts us is, I guess, individual. I know there's a lot of stress hormones coursing through your body. And I know we were completely forgetful for at least 3 weeks after the impact, which made it really interesting. You know, you'd go out to do things and forget what you were looking for, where you're going. So I acknowledge that some of you could still be navigating this space, and it's very, very normal to be in that. And for many people who've been impacted by the latest flooding events, it may feel too soon to work through some of the processes I'm talking about today. So I'm sharing these, you know, they're there for when you are ready. It's really, really important. And what natural disaster recovery has taught me is that it's really vital that we work through these processes at a pace that's right for us and not push ourselves through it or be pushed or rushed through it. You know, not everyone who's been through it, if you haven't been through it, you may not understand. And I've been in that role myself of maybe pushing people a little quickly through a process where it really can be individual how long that takes. So yeah, it's a long journey ahead, and I think it's just being there for the long haul. So these sessions are being recorded, and for those of you who are watching today and some of this feels a bit ahead of where you're at, you can come back and watch these recordings when you need to, which is great. And you can also review them again if you need to be reminded of the process, or just have another listen. There could be things, you know, we take in what we need most at the time, and sometimes when we can come back, we can go a little deeper and work through that process in our own time and space. So I want to just share my screen with you all and run through some slides, which hopefully you can all see there. I just want to acknowledge that natural disaster recovery is a grief process. We all navigate this individually. It's not linear, as you can see by this diagram. But yeah, just being aware that we're in this process, and that's why everyone's going to be impacted differently. Each of our experiences are individual, but it is sharing our experiences is also part of this process and being able to talk it through. So, you know, being 3 years into a fire recovery journey, I can still experience emotions when I reflect back, or I see photos of 3 years ago, or find something burnt down the paddock, and it can come washing back over you. So if this presentation brings up any emotions for you, that is completely normal and acceptable, but please reach out to the guys here at the DPI in the recovery team if you need any support, and they can direct you and refer you to the right organisations for you and your area. So please keep that in mind. A little bit about me. My husband and I run a business called Reinventing Agriculture, and it's really about education and coaching for farmers on reinvention journeys. A lot of that's around regenerative agricultural systems. However, you know, natural disaster recovery is basically reinvention at its best. You know, you're faced with a situation and needing to rebuild and regroup. I see there's 3 foundational pieces to building resilient businesses in any realm, and that's where we look at our human capital and natural capital and our financial capital. I sort of found my 30 years of working in agriculture, it's making me feel old saying that, and I've worked as a rural financial counsellor for a number of years, so I was on the front line of flood recovery and drought recovery and storms and disasters of every kind, and I think I learned a lot about that support role for those processes then. And it wasn't until later that I was then personally impacted by the fire. But I also worked in the realm of whole farm planning as well, which some of these processes I'm sharing with you in these 3 webinars have come from both of those realms, I guess, and looking at the things that really make a difference when we're in this space. And I think when we're building resilience in every form in our business, we need to focus on managing our financials well, our people well, and our natural capital well. And in that process of recovery, these are still equally important. These webinars are really going to focus on the human side of disaster recovery and the business aspects, but I will probably delve in and touch on the financial capital and natural capital a little bit on the 3rd webinar. So yeah, that is coming through. So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything about me, but I guess you know, one of the things I can look back on and experiencing natural disaster in our landscape and our property was that learning how nothing really stays the same and how I'd expected it would. So that was really interesting to come out of that. And, you know, how normal it is for people in this space to be feeling overwhelmed. You may find, you know, it's hard to plan ahead and make decisions. So, you know, it's a gradual process, I think, of coming to terms with where you're at and then where you want to be. And that's what we're going to talk about today. You do need to have a clear head when you're thinking about replanning and making decisions about where to next. So please, again, I'll reinforce this a bit through these webinars. Don't feel pressured to put things back together overnight. You need to allow time, you know, for things to kind of settle and for you to give full consideration to things. But it is important to do things that are helping you feel a little bit more in control. So it's really just a journey of discovery and prioritizing when you're going through this process. And it is a really long process. There's no pressure also to rebuild as it was. You suddenly have an opportunity to do things differently. And in our case, we refenced our property so much better than it was before. So there's been things that have come out of it that I'd never want to wish on anyone to go through, but then you can find those opportunities. So for us, it was a complete redesign of fencing for grazing management. But, you know, there'll be aspects you'll be able to do differently and learn from the past. But yeah, it is just, I think, taking your time and working through this process is really, really important. So there's going to be 3 webinars in this space. I'm just going to move something off my screen. This is one of 3. We're going to talk about planning for success today. And in webinar 2, we'll talk about risks and opportunities. And then webinar 3, the circle of influence, which is really focusing in on the things which we can control that build those foundations for resilience as we're rebuilding from disaster. This is a photo in the background of my husband, Angus, who rebuilding some fences after the fire. Well, the grass had grown back. You know, we could certainly see the still scars in the landscape with burnt trees and things. So yeah, that's where that photo came from, a definite rebuild process. And today, this is what we're going to be talking about. So the planning, I guess the planning sections I'm going to be talking to you about today are really the basis of strategic planning and business planning and whole farm planning. Whatever angle you look at, these are things that are really, really useful to work through. Everything I'm going to share with you in these webinars, I have tried and tested with farmers, and I haven't had them run screaming from their room when we do their visions yet. So that's a good outcome. But it sometimes feels a bit hard to justify spending time on these things. But it really is where the rubber hits the road. And I'll explain to you today why these things are so important. And we'll keep it really simple, because for me, simple plans are better than no plans. And the simple plan that you actually use will trump a complicated plan that you never look at. So we'll keep it really simple, and we'll work through firstly how to look at your vision and why you should bother, how to look at your values and how they are going to help you navigate the disaster recovery process. We'll look at a smarter goal setting process that really helps make a difference when we look at the things we're trying to achieve and how to get unstuck when we sometimes stall. And I'm going to share a really simple action plan template that you can use to help you track your progress. Again, all these are simple, but tried and true. Okay, so that's what you're in for today. As I said, it's based on a whole farm planning or business planning process where we look at, you know, developing our vision, values, and goals. This is like, where are we going? You know, where are we going to be? We start with that first, and then we take a look at where we currently are, which will be webinar 2. And we'll look at planning and taking actions to get you from where you are now to where you want to be. So that theme will be coming through the whole 3 webinars. But yeah, today's really about figuring out where you want to be. Session 2, where are you starting from? Let's take stock now. And then over this process, you'll emerge with a really clear, simple action plan that you can help to guide you on the next steps is the intention. And I'll also share, you know, some tips on monitoring and review on the last webinar as well, because that's really important. There's no point wasting our time creating a short, simple plan if we don't use it. Often we start with a bit of a jumbled mess. We go, oh, here's the plan, it's all in my head. And this is classically where plans in our head, this is what they can look like, okay? So, you know, it might be familiar to you guys, but we often start here And this is why we sort of work through this process. And I think when we look at any kind of planning process, whether it be a business plan, a whole farm plan, a disaster recovery plan, we are starting by unraveling the threads. You know, we can start with a bit of overwhelm and a bit of a lot of stuff in our head. It starts by unraveling that thread. And the vision, values, and goals that we're going to look at today are going to help unravel that thread so that you can find some direction out of where you're at, and find that, where the right way ahead that's right for you, so that you end up with something a little bit more distilled and neat that you can follow along. So this is sort of the journey. We're all designing all the time. And in part of this process, every decision we make, we're designing something. Every time we move something around in our landscape or even in the home, we're actually designing. We just don't realize it. But when we plan intentionally, we're being more intentional with our design in our business and our recovery. So that's what it's all about. It's really important to have a written plan, and there is a workbook accompanying these 3 webinars that I've distilled these concepts into a form that you can then work through with a bit of background information where relevant and some exercises to help you clarify what we're talking about today and over the next 3 webinars. It's the benefits of writing this stuff down cannot be underestimated, and getting it out of your head. One, you get things out of your head and you're way more clear. It's just, you have to get clear to write it down. You also get a bit more detail around what you're doing. And, you'll also be able to communicate more clearly with other people, both in your business and also, for example, your bank manager. If you're coming out of this process and needing to look and plan ahead, it's really helpful to have written plans in this format so that you can show your banker or other people in the business, even to work with other advisors and getting advice on any aspect. Having something written down to start with makes it really simple to sort of go from there. And it helps us work smarter, not harder. There'll be no shortage of things for you to do in this space. And it will, even 3 years down the track, we have no shortage of things we still have to do. So, it's more about prioritizing and doing first things first and how they fit for you, because somebody else's thing that might be first on their list of priorities could be completely different for you. So it's really important that you know what your priorities are. It's, and this is a quote I use a lot when I'm convincing people to write their plans down. It is that an average farmer with a good holistic strategy is in a much better position than an outstanding farmer who only focuses on the production. So it's really just helping us plan for success, and get clear on our priorities. The most successful farmers clearly organize and execute around their priorities. And this plan's going to help you find that pathway ahead. The first step, as I said, is what is your vision? It is really an interesting concept, getting clear on your vision. It's, when we clarify our vision, it's a picture of where we want to be, and what matters most to us. What is it that we're trying to create? It really helps us define our purpose, but also, our direction. It inspires us to get up every day and keep moving towards that vision we have, and motivates us. And it can, when we get really clear on it, we can be more confident in the steps we're taking because we know they're aligning to get us towards our vision. I find having a vision has been one of the most powerful tools I've ever used in my life. And it's something that works in mysterious ways. You get clear and you kind of, surrender to that vision, and things seem to unfold how they need to unfold. So it is really, really powerful. It seems a bit airy-fairy, but I've given you some exercises in the workbook that'll just help you, explore what that could be for you. If you're struggling sometimes it can be really hard, particularly in farming businesses, to think about where we want to be, because we're so accustomed to reacting to what nature throws at us and government policy throws at us, and all the things we're dealing with that are out of our control. So think about what it is you want to leave behind, and that's where you can kind of come back to your place in this vision. Is what is it I really want to create here, and what do I want to leave behind? So if you're struggling to look ahead, maybe think about what is the legacy I want to leave in this landscape. That often helps us get out of that space, I find. But it is really about where do we want to be, not how we're going to get there. That comes later. What is our ideal farming business look and feel like every day? I guess it's it's all about just keeping us finely tuned to that. So the keys in effective visioning I might come back to that in a second. Yeah, just skipped ahead too quickly there. It is really important when we get into vision is we think about where we want to be, not what we don't want. So we always got to sort of put it in a positive framework and frame it positively, like where we want to be, not what we don't want. It's really important to just let that sit and put that vision out there. And often it's really nice to have a written vision you can have up on the office wall to remind you all. I've been to farms where they have it up in the lounge room of the home. This is our vision, and it's framed and it's written and it's the guiding light for the family. And so you can craft that vision and have it up where you see it. And it's also not to lock you in forever. I think I've noticed a lot of people who are worried because what if something better came along? Well, it's certainly not about locking you in. It's something you should review and adjust as you need to. I remember coming home from a holistic management course that I was doing, and my husband wasn't doing it. I was doing it through my work at the time, and writing the holistic goal up and trying to engage him in that process. And it was interesting to do that, but I put it up in the office, and he came to me probably about 8 years later and goes, we've got to update our vision. We've outgrown it. And that's the purpose. We'd sort of reached that level. Oh yeah, we really do. What's next? You know, our children had grown a lot older. We're at a different stage of life. And it was really nice that we both sat down and recreated the next vision. So yeah, just know that it's a work in progress. It's not about something fixed. It's something that will evolve with you, and it should. It's something you should review probably every year. You should review your planning processes. So yeah, it's process, not destination. And it's a process that it's really good to revisit and reuse. So there will be some prompts, as I said, in the workbook that will help you kind of hone into that. The more you can explore your vision in a couple of different ways, the more you'll unearth the things that are important to you. Then once you've explored it, you're then needing to kind of condense that vision into a short statement, something that's short, focused, realistic, and achievable, that you can also see and measure those results. So something like this is an example that I just pulled out of my notes, but we operate a profitable and enjoyable family-owned livestock business that generates consistent improvements to our natural, human, and financial resource base. Something simple, a few lines. Some people have a whole page vision, and that can be okay if that's what you want to do. Some people have a few paragraphs, or you can condense it into a few lines, but just something that really sums up where it is you want to be, as if it is here now. That is the key. And you can see how that vision statement's written in present tense, as in it's here now. This is what we do. And that's really, really important. So have a go at it and don't get stuck. And anyone who's working through these webinars, if you need to reach out to me with questions, you will be able to find me. I'm sure we can include my contact details, and I think my website's on the workbook. So reach out if you get stuck or you have a question. I'm only too happy to help guide you in the right direction. Because the whole point of visioning is, you know, a vision without a plan is just a dream. So we've got to that step so far. But then we need to put the plan in place to achieve that vision. A plan without a vision, you're just working and working, aren't you? It's just drudgery. But a vision with a plan can change the world. And that's what we're trying to do. Find out where you're going, then put the plans in place to help you get there. And the next step in that is your values. So your values are the guiding principles that determine what you do and how you do it. You know, they're operating whether you're conscious of them or not. They're always there in the background. They're really a way of defining what's most important to you, and they really help guide your decision making. One of the things with visions and values and goals that's really, really important, if we don't spend time getting clear on these things for us, we can wake up one day having followed someone else's vision or values or goals and not define them ourselves. And I've seen that happen in businesses. So this is why it's really important just to kind of drill down and really clarify what these are. They're there, but knowing them means you can be more conscious in your decision making. And I guess knowing what's right for you in every situation. Yeah, I'm thinking, what else have I got to tell you about values? The other thing about values is when we're making decisions, like we might decide to take an action in our business. And if we haven't considered our values, things can seem really hard work. You know, we become frustrated and we feel like we're pushing things uphill, you know, and that can be our values out of alignment. You know, we've made a decision that's just conflicting with our values. And we know that because we feel uncomfortable, frustrated, or things are just really hard going on an emotional level. That's where being more conscious of our values can come in. The common one for that is family values. They're making decisions that take you away from family much more than you'd like. So, you know, you want to work in one area, but you've also got to marry that with a family value. For example, that can be a really common value conflict. When we do things in alignment with our values, life feels much better. We're more satisfied with what we're doing. So it's really important to clarify those values in any planning process. So if you haven't done this, what I've got in store for you is a bit of a values exercise in the workbook that's really quite simple, that asks you to go through a massive values. Some of these I pulled out of that list. They're ones I often see farmers identifying in the coaching work I do and the farm planning courses I used to run. Hard work often used to feature a lot in farm planning courses. I think it came up a bit in some of my business coaching clients as well. But also thinking, you know, is that a value, or would we prefer to focus on excellence or challenge or honesty? You know, what's most important to us? So you'll go through that list and identify your top values. Once you can see those, that will really help you to align your actions with what's most important to you. And most importantly, to make decisions that are in alignment with you and your business. And again, it's all about decision making. So I find where the rubber hits the road with values is decisions. And we're all faced with lots of decisions, particularly in disaster recovery. You know, you are faced with many, many decisions about what's happening, what's going on, what do I do next? Come back to your vision and then know what your values are. And you're suddenly finding some anchor points for that planning process, you know, in that process. It also could be faced with, I think the other areas I like to use values of when we're faced with a decision like, what enterprises should I run? Are these still the right enterprises for my business? Should I seek some off-farm employment? It can help you to find the off-farm employment that fits best for you. Your vision and values can be really important in that. You know, when to compromise on a decision and when to stay firm on it, when to change and follow a new path in your business. It can come down to those values. And again, they're your anchor points. It'll help you keep your integrity and a sense of going in the right direction for you as an individual and you guys as in your business as well. So it's really about making decisions and using that core value worksheet. The next step is the one that I think goals is a funny word, isn't it? I often equate goals to budgeting or dieting. So if the word goals kind of irks you, just say maybe call it outcomes, and see if that fits better for you. But it's really about where you're going and how you're getting there and when you'll arrive. Like, it's really, really important. These are the achievements, the things that are going to get you towards that vision we were talking about as the first step. Then it's to think about what goals do we have that are going to get us there. It's really, really important to have these written down, and we're going to go through the keys to goal setting in a minute. But again, if we don't know where we want to be, we don't know what's most important to us with our values, and we don't have goals, how do we know we're going to get where we need to go? We're more at risk of ending up on someone else's agenda, because if we don't clarify what it is we want, someone or something else will. So this is why this is so important, and why it's a key to regrouping and a key to any business really in getting that direction clear is having clear goals. And I guess it's also a way of helping you evaluate alternatives and see opportunities, is knowing where you sit in respect of all of these things. It's also, I think when we get clearer, we're going to be more focused, and we're going to be focusing our time, energy, and money on the things that are most appropriate for us. Okay. So the outcomes we want to create, otherwise we're just reacting to what life throws at us. And each day we could be off on a different path, or sort of approaching things with a bit of a scattergun approach and not being on a clear path. So this is all about creating instead of reacting, and creating the pathway that's right for us. So there's 3 really important keys to goal setting, and these actually work. I've used them myself. I've used them with clients, and it's really powerful, but really simple. The first key is writing our goals down. It's just, I can't overestimate how important it is to get it out of your head and that jumble we saw in that slide earlier and onto paper. Every time I write stuff down, it happens. You're never quite sure how and when, but this just seems to be that you then able to see the opportunities that get you there. There was a study done in the United States at a university in California where they actually studied goal setting, and they had a heap of university students were the participants in this study. They found that you are 42% more likely to achieve your goals just by writing them down, without doing anything but writing them down, which is pretty amazing. And I have to say, I've seen that work for me. Just the process of writing it down has been extraordinary. Then they studied different things people did after they wrote the goals down. And they found that 70% of participants who sent weekly updates to a friend reported their goals were successful, rather than 35% who just kept them to themselves and didn't write them down. So there's a lot of, data there showing that it's really powerful to write them down, and it's, sharing them is also really good. I guess if we don't write the goals down, we haven't really committed to them either. They're more like just a wishy-washy thing in our head. So it's really, really important to write them down. And sometimes we might say, oh, where do I have the time to write my goals down? I've got so much to do. But if we don't have time to write them down, how are we going to have the time to achieve them? So you can spend 5 minutes brainstorming some goals and it'll be really well worth it. And hopefully maybe half an hour and it'd be even better. So yeah, if we write them down, we get really clear. As I said, it really does force us to be clear. If we don't have written goals and we don't have a clear vision, we're like on a journey without a roadmap, and we're going to go around in circles because we're not going to know where we're going. So it is really giving us a bit of a roadmap for our business. And again, it's a roadmap that you can change at any time when you need to, but you are setting that direction for yourself. I think writing them down is also really motivating because you've kind of gotten clear and you've written them. It's something about that I actually like to handwrite them, but typing them is just as good. You're actually getting them out and it's motivating action. It also does help you evaluate opportunities. If you come across something that sounds really awesome, sometimes we can follow something without really running it past our own, I guess, barometer of vision and goals and values. They give you a filter from which to look at that opportunity. Go, does this fit or not? Or am I just following another distraction? So it's really, really helpful. It keeps us from getting distracted off course because we can use these as our anchors. I think it also can help you to overcome resistance. Sometimes if we're resisting writing goals down, it's a pretty good sign we need to do it because it's something holding us back from getting clear. And sometimes just getting a little bit uncomfortable and moving through that resistance is really helpful as well. But it also helps us to celebrate our progress. So many of us, and I've been guilty of this, is you see all the jobs you haven't done yet. And there's piles and piles of them there. And every time you do one thing, you focus on the next. But it's really, really valuable to sit and take stock and go, what have we achieved in this last few months or this month or this week? Weekly is really good to note what you've actually achieved, because then you're not constantly just looking out there all the time. You're actually recognizing what you've achieved. And it's a really important foundation of looking after your mindset and your motivation and your well-being in this process of recovery is actually acknowledging all the things you've already done instead of constantly looking out there at what you haven't. So it gives you that goal, I suppose, that milestone to actually celebrate and see your progress. So that's really, really cool. There's nothing cooler actually than looking at some goals you wrote a year ago and go, oh, wow, those things actually happened. And I got clear and I took the right actions, and it's quite a rewarding process. The other thing that goals should be is smarter. You may have heard the term SMART goals, but I've extended that a little bit, and I'll show you what smarter goals are. I would say that smarter goals were specific, so they're specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're also relevant to you, because there's no point having goals that aren't relevant. It's just not going to be good use of our time. They have a time frame, but they're also ecological and rewarding, and these steps really help us. And I'll show you an example. I'll work through an example with you on this slide of why encourage a smarter approach to goal setting. One of the goals I've seen a lot is some people will say, my goals are on to reduce debt. That's great. And it's a very common goal for all of us to want to reduce our debt. However, I'll show you why we need to get smarter and how much more likely this is to happen when we do. So if we were going to make that specific, it's not really specific in that form. We would say what we're going to pay off. So we're going to pay off, for example, in my example, we'll pay off the outstanding balance on the stock loan. How will we measure that? Well, I say we're going to pay off the $50,000 balance. So suddenly it's measurable, it's a specific loan, and it's got a quantity on it. Is it achievable? Well, no, actually it's not. Our cash flow shows we can really only manage $5,000 reduction on the loan this financial year. So suddenly, and all the group partners in this example are agreeing on that. So suddenly we've gone from something that was just setting us up to fail to something that's achievable, that's still working in the right direction. So we've now honed that in on our cash flow. Is it relevant? Yes, because the loan has really expensive interest. So it's a clear priority for the business. So whatever makes it relevant to you is important. A time frame is really helpful. If we don't have a time frame, and I've seen this in action with farmers who don't ever commit to a time frame for this, that goal never shifts. It's constantly, I'll reduce my debt, but it's almost like a pie in the sky idea. Suddenly we're going to have a time frame. We're going to pay off $5,000 by the end of June this financial year. That's giving it a time frame. We know it fits with the cash flow, and we've made a decision on when we'll take the action to achieve the goal. You can see how suddenly that goal's becoming more achievable. Is it ecological? Yes, because we'll have more capacity when we reduce our debt to look after the ecosystem on our farm. So, that's really important to think about it in terms of the natural capital in our business. Is it rewarding? Yes, because it will reduce the stress about the interest we're being charged on this loan, and we'll feel so much better. So, suddenly you can see there's a motivating factor. So working through your goals and taking them from this reducing debt, or whatever your goal is, you can use this process to really nut it out and come up with your smarter goal, which will say here, we'll reduce the outstanding balance on the loan by making $5,000 principal repayment before the 30th of June. 2022. So suddenly you can see how actioning that with your goals makes such a difference. It is life-changing. And you've written it down, you've gotten really, really clear, and you've had to think about what you're going to do to achieve it. So you've suddenly now got an action plan for your template, which is coming up in a minute. The other trick to goal setting is to review your goals. As I said, writing them down makes it easier to review them. But that study I was talking about before, they found that if the goals were written down and reviewed them regularly, they gave people a 95% higher chance of achieving their desired outcomes. So the people who actually write down their goals and actually review them are among the top achievers in the world. So there's no excuse not to write these down. But it also then you're getting clear, you're getting some things that are going to take you where you want to be. You've actually spent some time getting this to a point where it's actually going to be practical, not just an exercise for doing the exercise's sake. The next thing is to create an action plan, or to take action towards those goals. It's really, really important to break down that goal into meaningful steps. And you can see you have an action there for an action plan already, that debt will be reduced by June. But if you're feeling like you've got goals that are overwhelming you, it means you need to break them down more and get more specific about the little steps. Sometimes it's incremental steps that you need to get to a certain outcome. And that $50,000 goal originally in little steps is going to get done. And every year, if that budget's looking at what can we get rid of on that debt, you're taking the steps to get there. So it's really, really important. Action is where it all happens. And this is, sometimes we start with the action without looking at our values and our vision and our goals. And that's when we're in a bit of a, we're just running around a bit like a chook with our head cut off. And we're not always working in a logical process that's going to get us where we want to be, because we're sort of reacting. It's really actually normal after natural disaster recovery to find ourselves in that space because of the overwhelm and the stress hormones we're navigating. We can get in there for a bit. So these tools that help you regroup and just refocus and get yourself on track again. It's quite don't beat yourself up if you're feeling that way, because it's exactly what we experienced, and it's something I see is quite normal for all of us in that process. This action plan template that's in the workbook, I developed when I was working as the rural financial counsellor, and it really helped my clients get clear on what they're going to do next and by when. And it helped us review, working together, it helped review the progress. But you can use this to keep yourself on the right track. Or you can do it as a whole business, through your family business meetings to keep you on track. It's simple. We don't need lots and lots of information. We just need to know what's going to happen, who's going to do it, when are we aiming to have it done by, and then we need to review it regularly. So you may review these actions weekly or monthly, according to how you generally run your business. At an outside, probably monthly. Some businesses have weekly business meetings where you could be working through this every time. But, just writing down and getting clear on those actions, who's doing it, by when. This is as simple as it needs to be. I often keep this little action plan on the back of any planning documents because it's simple to find and you can just pick it up and here it is on the back page. Everything we've worked through is going to give us these actions to take care of, I guess. So, it's really a way of guiding ourselves. We're coming through this process of where we're going, what we're going to do, how we're going to chunk it down into little achievable steps. Little steps make a huge difference. So hopefully that's the first session on the content wrapped up. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, check the chat box, and I'd be open for any questions. And just remember, the next 2 webinars, we're going to delve a bit more deeper into this process. Like, it's all a process of regrouping, and you'll feel like you've completed the whole step once you go through all of these. So I'll stop sharing and have a look at the chat. And plenty of time for questions. So happy for you to either type questions in the chat or come off mute if you'd like to ask a question. Either way is fine. Got Maury, Nara. So nice to see such a diversity of locations on here.
Hi, Kim. So Alicia hasn't received the workbook. That's fine. Yeah, it should have come by email from the Humanitix link. So you should receive the workbook. If not, Alicia, I'll track you down in the chat, and we will send the workbook through, if that's okay. So any other questions about the initial process? Working smarter? Setting up
Can I dive in and ask a question, please?
Yeah, great.
Hello. Henry Goodall from the DPI. Kim, writing things down, looking at goals and values, good, fine. I do that. The bit that trips me over is getting the rubber on the road, getting the action. I can spend a heap of time getting that mess out of my head and getting a list and even I'm good at writing two done lists. Sometimes I love to write things down, and so I can get the pleasure of scrubbing them off. But the bit that I have trouble with is, I can work out the project, I know the goals and that, but actually putting the bloody thing into action is where I get stumbled. So what's your tips or ideas?
Have you tried the SMARTer framework on your goals, Henry? And trying to chunk it down? Because I find that really helps you distill it from the big picture to the action. What's the next action?
Yeah, chop it into bite-sized chunks.
Yeah.
How do you eat an elephant?
Yeah. One bite at a time. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So bigger projects, I'm pretty good at spending money at Bunnings and then coming home and thinking, yeah, good, I've got everything I need, and then I'll do step 1 or 2, and then I don't know, sometimes I find it hard it's probably just self-discipline, but just find it hard to maintain that momentum.
Yeah.
Or get the time, or suddenly I'll get 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon and do that, and then I think, next Sunday we're going away,
That's a really good question, because I see that happens to all of us at times. Like, and you get those either distractions or life happens, like, because we can have a nice plan, but life doesn't happen linearly and fit in big planning boxes. So it's really, I think, important to maybe chunk it down, but then look at what you've already done. If we start focusing on all the things we haven't done yet, we get overwhelmed. And I know, like, we were only walking around yesterday looking at all of the jobs going, it's overwhelming, but it was like, well, we've got today, what's the priority for today? And suddenly you can move through that. But it is that, I think a lot of us are really guilty of not acknowledging the work we've already done. You've already got the supplies from Bunnings, you've already done this part of it, what's the next step? But actually celebrating the bits you've done, because you just get overwhelmed because you see all the things that you haven't finished. Yeah. Which is classic in disaster recovery, because there's so much work and years of work. And so we still have things people could drive in here and not, it looks wonderful this year, but we still see all the things we haven't fixed yet. So managing that is that, okay, but what have we done? And sometimes reflecting on the things we have done really can regroup ourselves, because I think it's our inner resistance and our overwhelm and our inability to be grateful for what we've already done before we can take the next step. And
yeah. I find that's a good point. Actually, I'm very good at seeing, rather than seeing what is, I'm very good at seeing what isn't or what hasn't been done. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. That's a good question.
And Kim, with the emotional roller coaster or the Ferris wheel, that we go on, how does that impact our motivation, and how can do we just acknowledge the fact that we're not feeling 100% today? How does that work?
I think that's also a really good question. And it is allowing yourself to do that, or it'll creep up on you if you try and push through too hard. We can make ourselves unwell. Stress can impact us in many ways. So I think it's really important to allow that process and allow yourself to have a few bad days. Like, that's here, it's normal. And, I once was on a workshop on disaster recovery, and one of the women who was on a panel was saying she allowed herself to have a day on the mat where she just did nothing. And for us, we actually went on a trip. We'd planned a trip in middle of 2019 before the fire, and we went, and it kind of felt weird going, but it was the best thing we could do. We went over to the States for a month, and it was like, we came back, it was still an apocalypse when we got home, but we committed because the plans were there. We'd already done it. We didn't renege it. And it was really well timed, because I think we needed a break and we needed some perspective. So it can feel it almost felt inappropriate to be going away in that state, but it actually was, in hindsight, was a real gift to ourselves to take a break and come back with a bit of renewed enthusiasm for the job at hand. So even if that's a weekend away or a week or whatever you can manage, ours was a pretty extreme trip that was already planned. No, I probably wouldn't have done that unless we'd already committed, but I definitely could see the benefit in taking a break and regrouping that way and allowing yourself a bit of time out if you can. Yeah,
I can understand that, especially if you're almost being re-traumatized every time you drive up that driveway, and seeing what wasn't and what's no longer there. Yeah, I can imagine that. So yes, a week away of doing something different, even if you're just in a little cabin by yourself, in a different space. I can understand that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we are 10 to 12. We may call it, if that's okay with everyone. As we said, that there are 3 in this series. Today is the first one. It has been recorded. We will put it online. The second one is tomorrow at 11 a.m. And then the last one is on the 8th of June, also at 11 a.m. We hoped that Smoko would be around 11 o'clock and everyone will be coming in for their cuppers. So I want to say thank you very much to everyone that has attended. And I want to say a really big thank you to Kim for sharing your stories, your personal story, as well as all of your coaching and education experience. It's been really lovely. And Alicia made a comment that you know, we've never seen the ER in SMART. I've always heard of SMART goals, but it's great to have that extra insight, definitely. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's one where I can learn a bit more. Is there anything from anyone else quickly? I think there are crickets there. So we might call it. So thank you so much to everyone. Hopefully we will see you again soon. Okay, remember tomorrow.